Y.
Right, let's go through these. So what we're looking for, as we said, when we're simplifying algebraic fractions, you can only do what you do with numbers. So, bless you. Like I said before, if we are looking at 3/6 and we want to simplify 3/6, what we can't do is split it like 2 plus 1 and 2 plus 4, right? Although that is equal to 3/6, we cannot cancel and leave 1/4 because we know that this is actually a half. So it has to be split into, as someone said earlier, factors, and we are looking for the highest common factor. So in this case, 3 is the highest common factor. So I can cancel the 3. Now here's my question, what actually happens to the 3's?
Is it because they're the same number, they like cancel each other because they're the same
Okay,
number?
but that's what I want to know. What do we mean by cancel each other?
They go into
3 divided by 3 equals 0, so this is 1. Oh, never mind.
and 1 you don't have to write.
The thing is, yes, it's that. So what we can actually do when we have a fraction like this, we can actually rewrite that as 3/3 times 1/2. We can split like that. So 3/3 is actually 1 times a half. So what we do in shortcut is we just don't bother writing the 1 because 1 times anything
What's 1?
is what it is. So we just kind of cross them out. But because that's what you're told from an early point, crossing out, you basically think just gets rid of them. And it doesn't. It actually writes them as their own equivalent fraction, but that fraction is 1 and we don't need to write it. Now that, I'm sure a couple of you have realised, comes into play in the last one on this sheet, on this level 1 sheet. Alright? So, when we look at this, actually quite often algebraic fractions are easier, because this is 3 times x and 3 times y, which could be written, I know you're not doing this, but could be written as 3/3 times x over y. Alright, now the 3/3 is 1, so we kind of just cross it and we're left with x over y. Alright, now I'm not going to do that from now on, but what we do, I guess what you're would be looking at is, well, you know that 3 goes into 9. And what you actually mean by that is, well, that's 3 times 1 and that's 3 times 3. So you cross out the 3's and you're left with 1/3. So you're left with 1/3 times A times B. So we just write A/3B. Okay? So all of those are fine, yeah? They're all pretty much the same. So lots of them end up with a 1. Now what I wanted to check on, right, is the harder ones at the end.
No.
So we're going through, they just get more complicated, but there's still only multiplication there. So we've got, suddenly you start just doing them quick. So 36, 72 I recognise as 1 and 2. There's 4 u's on the top, 3 u's on the bottom, so I just cross them out and I'm left with just the 1, 2 there and 3 there. So I'm left with only UV over 2. Alright?
That looks simple.
That's fine. This one at the end, this is where a couple of people that have reached this far got a little bit confused. Only short time, but 16/32 is
1/2.
a half again. Okay? And because I write the 1/2, it now makes a little bit more sense. If I just cross them out, it makes less sense. But the 2, there's 2 W's on top,
3 on the bottom.
3 on the bottom, so actually I get rid of all of those and I'm left with 1 on the bottom. And I get rid of all the Z's and I'm left with 1 on the bottom. So I know I'm left with 2 WZ on the bottom.
With 1 on the top.
But if I hadn't written the 1, there's nothing there.
But don't you write 1 as
We do.
anyway?
We
if
do,
there's
yeah.
nothing?
Because I've written the 1/2, I can see that it would be the 1. Alright?
In general.
But if you just cross out and put just a 2 on the bottom, you kind of get left with, and I do see people say, oh well, that's 0 because there's nothing there.
Funny.
Yeah.
Or some people then say, well, if there is no top, then the bottom just becomes the whole thing. I see that as well, which is also not right.
Don't you just know that when there's not like a number, you put 1?
Well, some people do.
Typically, like.
Some people do, but it's about, do you understand why that's the case? And that is it, right? Because we are left with that 1. Okay. So what about, let's just have a quick look at one from each of these other ones. So now we're multiplying fractions. So just think, how do we multiply 2/7 by 14 32s? What would you do?
You turn it around. No, that's with division.
Yeah.
You do the cross, like you do the crisscross.
No.
No?
Oh, it depends what you're going to do, crisscrossing.
Yeah, I like to do how often does the 2 fit into the 32 and how often
Okay,
the 7 and the
so when you multiply fractions, you are actually just multiplying the tops and bottoms together, yeah? And you can simplify at the end, or we can do what's called cross cancellation and cancel tops with bottoms before you do that to make your multiplication easier. So for instance, I know that 7 and 14, well, that would be the 1 and the 2, right? And then the 2 and the 32 would be a 1 and a 16. Okay? Now I've got the answer, 1 times 2 and 1 times 16 would give me 2 over 16, which actually still cancels down to 1 over 8. Now, that's what I do with numbers, therefore that's what I do with letters, with algebra. Alright? So, how do we go about it? Well, we can do 6x times y, and we do y squared times x squared.
So 6y.
But what we can do first is cancel tops and bottoms. So this y would cancel with one of those, and I'm left with a 1 again.
1 and a y.
And the x cancels one of these x's. Okay? So I'm left with 6 times 1 is 6, and y times x
Is xy. No, but is
y x x y, doesn't matter.
Isn't x in the alphabet before y?
But doesn't matter. Numbers come first, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to do it in alphabetical order. We do have to put numbers before letters though. Okay, does that make sense? Right, what I want to do though, before you carry on, so those of you that have continued not to pay any attention to me and get on with work, alright?
I know this one.
When we divide, what's the rule for division?
Keep, change,
Split.
Okay, so you keep the first one, change that to a times, and flip the other one, and then we just do a multiplication again. Yeah?
Can you do the question?
Nope. Okay? Not this stage. What I want to do is I want to go on to, have you got a question?
Yes. For that one, would you just
Which one?
the very last one?
The very last one,
Would
yeah?
you just keep that and then flip it into a multiplication?
So we want to multiply those, but then we would turn that into a multiply and flip this one.
Wait, so would you do bad math? Would you do division first? Wait, no. Wait,
No,
would
because
you do
remember
that
if you've got
side
division
first
and
then-
multiplication, work left to right.
No, I meant like, would you do that? You see the 6m and then that
Yeah.
first, and then
But if
that
I-
answer divided by that?
But if you think about it, if I just flip this one and turn that into a times, then it's just both times.
Oh.
And then I can cancel it like 3 fractions all multiplied, that's all. Okay.
Sorry, for the first one again, sorry. The reason we're putting the ones there, no, like the very top one that we
Yeah.
did way at the top, the reason we're putting the ones there
There.
is because we're using the 1 to represent a number because nothing's actually there? Or
No, 1's there. I take a common factor out, and the common factor of 2 and 32 is 2. But 2 is 2 times 1.
Okay.
So if I take the 2 out, I still leave 1 as a factor. I can't just leave nothing. It's not like putting 1
So
to
that's-
represent nothing. It's 1 because that's the factor that's left behind.
Oh, okay.
Like, if I take the factor of 32 out, excuse me, if I take the factor of 2 out of 32, I'm left with the factor of 16. I've got to leave something. So I leave the factor that I multiplied by.
So like, if you were to do this in like another incidence, could you have a different number left over than 1?
Yeah.
Okay. And what would you do with that?
The same thing. I would just write it down. So if that was if that was 6, and I took a factor of 2 out again,
then
I'd be left with 3.
Okay.
That's
and you just would leave that 3 there?
Right, so division, flip the fraction and multiply. What I want to do though is just quickly talk about adding fractions. How do you add fractions? Jen?
Common denominator.
Common denominator, yeah. So if I'm doing 1/5 plus 1/10, how do you do 1/5 plus 1/10, Ali?
You have to do 5 times. 5 times 3. No. 2.
What would be the common denominator I could use? 5 and 10. I could just.
5 times 2 and 10 times 1.
All right. So I would just do 5 times 2 because that would make it something over 10 plus 1 over 10. So same denominator. Now I have to do the same to the top. So it'd be 2 over 10. So the answer would end up being
3 over 10.
3 over 10. So that's what you do with numbers. That's what you do with algebra. So the denominator will be 10 again. So times by 2 gives me 2a over 10 plus b over 10. So when I add those together, my denominator is 10.
2ab.
And it's 2a plus b. With algebra, sometimes it's like, well, it seems longer. And it is, because you can't simplify much. Yes, Samantha?
Could you also bring that down to 1?
No, because remember that the 2 is not 2 times something, so I can't cancel it. Now what I want to show you, let's just check. How would you do this one then? The 4 over n plus 8 over n. Go on, Layla. I'll go. What would the common denominator be?
2.
What?
I can't make it 2 because I've got m and n. The
1.
common denominator has to be.
The denominator 1.
It has to be the denominator. So how can I make the denominator? It can't be.
Oh, so that would be times n, and that one would be times.
So this
m.
one I timed by n. This one times by m, and the denominator would be
MN?
mn.
And then you would have to times that by n then, and that by m.
So this would be 4n. This would be
8m.
8n.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Has to be the denominator.
All right. Now we do it together. So the denominator is mn, and the top is 4n plus 8m. And I can't cancel m's and n's. We need to talk about this a bit more, about when you can and can't cancel.
You can't cancel them because they're adding. It
Yes.
has to be a factor, so multiple.
Perfect. Yeah, there has to be a factor of m or n, and there isn't a common factor in the top. We haven't factorised in that way. Okay, so that's how you
subtract.
subtract's the same, only on the top you would subtract instead of add. Does that make sense for all of those? So you are, I will remind you again and again, when dealing with algebraic fractions and stuff, think about how you would do it with numbers and then do it with algebra.
For that one, actually never mind, Layla just said it with the factors, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no common factor, top and bottom. Okay?